Hi, I'm Donna Kallner, and in this unit of the cross-knit looping e-course, we'll take a closer look at the structure of cross-knit looping and see how simple stitch variations can produce different textures. Remember back in Lesson 1 when you first sampled different ways to hold the work? Those samples were worked in a continuous spiral around a needle chain start. Notice how one leg of the V crosses over the other leg of the V. In the gray sample, the piece was held upside down and worked from base to rim with the needle moving north to south and over the working thread. In the blue sample, the piece was held right side up and worked from base to rim with the needle moving south to north, but still over the working thread. In the first unit of this lesson, you learn to work a flat panel, alternating rows where the needle passes over the working thread with rows where the needle passes under the working thread. And this produced a consistent pattern of smooth V-shaped stitches on the front and bumpy stitches on the back. Now let's see what happens on that flat panel sample if we work all the rows with the needle moving over the working thread. At the end of a row, rotate the piece 180 degrees to work back across the live edge as usual, but this time don't move the needle under the working thread on alternate rows. Instead, pass the needle over the working thread on all rows. After a few rows of that variation, let's compare the two. Instead of V-shaped stitches, this pattern looks more like plating, but the front is still relatively smooth. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we could add a bit of variety to a smooth panel using some of that cool texture from the bumpy backside? There's an easy way to do that with a simple variation on how you hold the piece on alternate rows. For panels, you've been rotating the piece like a wheel, 180 degrees when you go from one row to the next. For this texture variation, turn the panel over like you would turn the pages of a book. We call this a flip turn. In effect, with flip turns, you work in a continuous spiral, but the panel is still flat. Here's what that flip turn looks like when the needle moves over the working thread on all rows. And here's what you get after a few rows of that. I bet you can think of other ways to create texture variations in cross-knit looping, and that should keep you entertained for a while. But before you go too far on that tangent, let me show you one more thing. The selvedges you create at the edges of flat panels come in very handy for connecting pieces, but not just for connecting finished panels. You can use them to build on an existing panel as well. Think of a selvage as something like a needle chain that gives you a live edge to stitch into. Choose whatever stitch variation you like. maybe turn another corner and build off another edge. By the time I finished playing with textures in this sample, the piece was about the size of my wrist. So I went ahead and stitched the narrow ends together and added cross knit looping on the edges in a contrasting color. And I added a little floating flat panel to cover up a pretty messy joint where I stitched the ends together. So now you can't see that. And my sampler is a bracelet. The projects for practice in the next video don't show many of these texture variations, but by now you know those projects are just suggestions. You can pick and choose from the ideas presented, add your own variations, or do something entirely different. There's just one thing I want to emphasize. Sometimes what you might think is a mistake is just a hidden opportunity. See what happens if you repeat it. You may end up with an amazing pattern or texture of your own design. Have fun! I'll see you in the next video.